Hey guys, here's chapter 4. Like I said, when at the Zoom meeting yesterday. So for those of you who didn't make it to the meeting, we read all of chapter 4 together, which was so fun. So it was nice to be able to stop and talk about things. So I will be posting questions and chapter 4. So even if you were at Zoom, at the Zoom meeting, we still can't, you'll still have this to listen back to, okay? So chapter 4, Sunday night, Daryl had trouble sleeping. Every few hours he woke up and checked the clock to see how much time he had left to rest. He wanted the night to last forever. At least then he would not have to go to school. Yet every time he looked at the clock, it was closer and closer to the time he had to get up, the time that he had to go to the same place as Tyree, alone. Daryl is awake when the day's first dim light started to creep into the small bedroom. The weather seemed to match his mood. A raw November rain left the sky dull, gray, and sunless. What a day to begin Blueford High, he thought. For breakfast, he forced himself to eat a few spoonfuls of oatmeal and a gulp of milk. Daryl, his mother scolded, that's not enough to keep a bird alive. How are you going to grow taller and heavier if you eat like that? I can't eat no more, Mom. My stomach feels funny already, Daryl said. Poor baby. You're really nervous about school, huh? I'm so sorry we had to make the move out here after school started. I know you wanted to stay at Franklin back at home. She came over and kissed him on the top of the head. Though part of him hated that she felt the need to baby him, another part of him was glad she did, as long as it was in private. It was comforting to know how much his mom loved him, and he clung to that when things got really bad, just as long as she never babied him in front of anybody. Even though the sky was dreary and rain seemed to be lurking in the swollen clouds, Daryl chose to walk to school. After the long bus trip from Philadelphia, he preferred to walk in the rain rather than sit on the bus, even if the ride lasted only a few minutes. At 7:30, he grabbed his backpack and headed out to the street. Just in case Tyree was waiting for him, Daryl walked off the main route, sticking instead to the back street, to all the back streets that went in the same direction. As he neared the school, Daryl saw more and more kids. He glanced, I'm just going to move this up here. If my charger will reach. There we go. As he neared the school, Daryl saw more and more kids. He glanced at the different groups of people all around him, hoping to see someone his own size. A freshman looking more like a middle schooler. Finally, he had reached the front of the school. He spotted a little guy with glasses. He was stockier than Daryl, but just as short. Daryl quickened his pace to catch up to him, figuring that at least they could share their misery over being so small. But as Daryl watched, two other boys walked up alongside of the smaller boy. Hey, Jamel, how's it going? One boy asked. The smaller boy turned and smiled. What's up, Miguel? The third spoke up then. Jamel, did Mitchell cover anything important on Friday? I missed class. We did Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet. You can borrow my notes, Jamel replied. Man, what kind of story is that? Makes me glad I don't have a girlfriend, said Miguel. The three continued talking and laughing, and Daryl figured they had probably been friends all their lives, just like he had been with Malik and Reggie and Mark. The short kid with the glasses is nothing like me, he thought. Jamel was like in. Daryl was on the outside looking in. Disappointed and alone, Daryl kept walking. Everyone was talking to somebody else. All the kids around him seemed to be with old friends. Everything Daryl had feared was coming true. He was probably the only new kid in the entire school. Daryl's first class was English. It took him a few minutes to figure out where the room was. As he walked in, he noticed a familiar face. Amber Lynn was in his class. Grateful to see someone he recognized, Daryl looked for a seat next to her. but they were all filled. A few other girls were talking to her when he came in, and she didn't seem to notice him. Anyway, why would she want to sit next to me when, why would she want me to sit next to her when she can have all her friends nearby? Daryl thought. Besides, he had to be careful not to take someone else's seat. He didn't want to make any enemies on his first day. He decided to take the nearest empty seat, but then saw a kid in the back of the room motioning for him. The boy was pointing to a desk next to him. Daryl thought the guy was being friendly, but as he sat down at the desk, he recognized the boy's face. He was one of the kids with Tyree the other day. Daryl turned to get up when he saw something that made his jaw drop. Tyree walked into the classroom. Quickly scanning the class, Tyree strolled over to the boy who sat next to Daryl and gave him a high five. "Sup, Rodney?" Tyree said. Then, walking behind Daryl's desk, Tyree kicked it, jarring Daryl and causing the whole desk to move a few inches. "Oops," Tyree said as he sat down in the desk on the other side of Daryl. Daryl felt trapped. He could not imagine how he would survive a whole year with Tyree and Rodney on either side of him. And just then, Mr. Mitchell came in. He stepped behind his desk at the front of the room and surveyed the class through dark wire-rimmed glasses. Daryl was relieved when he was there. It meant that he was safe, at least for the moment. "We have a transfer student all the way from Philadelphia joining the class today," Mr. Mitchell said. "His name is Daryl Mercer." As the teacher spoke, everyone in the class turned to look at Daryl. He wanted to hide under his desk. He could feel their eyes scanning him. He knew they were thinking he looked too short to be in high school, that he looked skinny and weak. Worse, he thought, maybe some of them were feeling sorry for him because of how small and scared he looked. He wanted to get up and run out of that class. Instead, he just waited in agony for the stares to go away. "Daryl," Mr. Mitchell continued, "are you sure you want to sit in the back of the class? I'm not always nice to people who sit in the back row." He smiled as he spoke, and then he turned to erase some writing off of the chalkboard. This is my chance, Daryl thought. A chance to get away from Tyree and Rodney. "I guess I could see better from the front," Daryl replied. As he started to get up, Daryl felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. Tyree's wide hand gripped his small shoulder like a giant claw and shoved him back in his seat. "You ain't going nowhere, fool," Tyree whispered. The whole time, Tyree looked straight ahead, making sure not to draw Mr. Mitchell's attention. Only nearby kids seemed to notice the drama unfolding in the back of the classroom. When Daryl looked at them for help, they just looked the other way. "I can, see better from up there," Daryl pleaded quietly to Tyree. "How much you going to be able to see when I punch your face so hard your eyes swell shut?" Daryl always thought teachers were fools. They never seemed to know what was going on in their classrooms. Kids could just be hiding drugs or threatening other kids, and the teachers would just ramble on about some poem written hundreds of years ago. Mr. Mitchell seemed worse because Tyree actually touched Daryl right in front of him, and he still did not notice. "We still have this empty desk up front," Mr. Mitchell said, "and it looks like Daryl doesn't want it. But, you know, it hurts my feelings to see such a good spot in the front room go to waste. So I'm gonna give it to a very lucky person today. Tyree, you're the winner. Why don't you move on up here?" "Why me?" Tyree growled. "I didn't do nothing." "The back of the room seems a bit too distracting for you. Besides, people sit in the front of the room tend to have much better grades and grade point averages than those who sit in the back. So come on up here," he said. A few kids in the classroom laughed. Daryl held his breath. He wanted Tyree to move as far away from him as possible. "I ain't moving from here," Tyree said in a sullen voice. "You're on the freshman football team, aren't you, Tyree?" Mr. Mitchell asked. "Yeah," Tyree mumbled, crossing his arms on his chest. "So?" Well, Coach Mead and I are good friends, and I would hate to have to tell him that you refuse to listen to the teacher. He might think you would refuse to listen on the football field. He might even kick you off the team. Now, if you want to avoid all that, why don't you just come sit up front? Tyree slowly got to his feet. On his way towards the front of the classroom, he deliberately stepped on Daryl's foot. Pain shot like electricity through Daryl's body. Oops, sorry, Tyree said, acting as innocent as possible. Despite the pain, Daryl felt great relief. At least, he did not have to sit next to Tyree. He also had respect for his new English teacher. Daryl was not exactly sure if Mr. Mitchell knew what Tyree was doing to him in the back of the room, but it did not matter. Without embarrassing Daryl, Mr. Mitchell had managed to stop what was happening, and for that, Daryl was grateful. As lunchtime drew near, Daryl started to feel a new kind of anxiety. He worried what he'd eat for lunch, that he would eat lunch alone. And when the bell rang, he walked reluctantly toward the cafeteria, dreading the meal to come. Inside, he took his place at the end of the line, got his plastic tray, and slowly moved towards the kitchen staff, where the kitchen staff dished out the food. The menu for the day was spaghetti and meatballs, along with a piece of garlic bread and a scoop of green beans. Dessert was a soupy green gelatin with strange-looking pieces of fruit suspended in it. Just like the school cafeteria back home, Daryl thought. When his tray was full, Daryl stepped into the rapidly filling lunch area. Is there anyone I can sit with? He wondered. Before him, hundreds of people talked, laughed, and ate with their friends. No one seemed as lost as he was. He spotted 2 freshman guys sitting nearby at a table with 2 empty chairs. Daryl had seen them in his morning classes. He wondered if he should try to go over to join them. They seemed friendly enough. Daryl carried his full tray towards them. In his mind, he rehearsed what would happen next. Anybody sitting here? He would ask. No, sit down, man, they said. Then Daryl would have his foot in the door. They'd talk about classes, their teachers, then they'd make fun of the cafeteria food and talk about the best-looking girls in the school. The ice would be broken. Even though he was nervous, he decided to try what he had rehearsed. He went over to the table with the 2 freshmen, his knees shaking the whole time. Anybody sitting here? Daryl asked. They did not respond the way they did in his mind. They didn't even look up. Were they ignoring him? He felt ridiculous standing there with a full tray, talking to people who were paying no attention to him. They continued their conversation as if he did not exist. Maybe they didn't hear me, he thought. He tried again in a louder voice. Anybody sitting here? This time one of the boys looked up. Yeah, we're saving the places for our friends. Sorry, Daryl said, embarrassed. Quickly, he moved away from the table. You stupid fool, Daryl thought. He imagined them laughing about him, chuckling at the scrawny kid who tried to sit at their table. Again, Daryl looked out over the cafeteria. It was filled with hundreds of kids his age. But for him, it was empty. Standing amidst the huge crowd, Daryl felt more alone than he ever had in his whole life. Daryl remembered being with this old friend in middle school. They were a single unit, 4 boys, 4 separate people, but they were really one. What if a new kid came along and tried to join their special group? Would they have welcomed him? Probably not. Malik might have looked at the stranger and said the same thing. We're saving that place for a friend. It would not have been that they were bad guys. It was just how things were. Get used to it, Daryl thought. Finally, he spotted an empty table over in the corner. He quickly moved to it the way people in a rainstorm run for cover. Alone, he shoved a tangled mass of soggy spaghetti noodles into his mouth. The food was bad, too, he thought. The spaghetti sauce tasted like red paste, and the gelatin dessert had an odd chemical flavor. He hoped that some other lonely student would join him, but nobody came. Daryl wondered what his friends back home were doing right now. At Franklin, they'd eat lunch in the table near a window. It was a great place to eat, and whoever got to the cafeteria first raced to claim it. From their table, they could see people passing by on the street below. Daryl and Malik liked to point out the attractive girls as they walked by the school. He wondered if they even noticed he was gone. Suddenly, Daryl was aware of two guys standing at his table. For a minute, he thought they'd come to join him. He looked up at them and smiled, trying to be as friendly as possible. "You done?" one of the guys asked. The question hit Daryl like a slap in the face. Instantly, he realized his mistake. The boys knew he was done eating, and they wanted his table. Not him, but his table. "Oh, yeah," Daryl said, picking up his tray and walking over to the trash barrel. He dumped his plastic dishes and stacked the tray. Before he walked out of the cafeteria, he paused for a second and looked back at the crowd behind him. It was amazing, he thought. He had spent the entire morning in classes with so many kids, but not one joined him for lunch. Would he spend the whole year at Blueford alone? That's the end of the chapter. Okay, so there's a few questions. There's 3 comprehension questions, and then there's like number 4 and 5. If you guys can write down your parents, find out what your parents' most current email address is, and the best phone number to reach them. It's more for me to just kind of like send out a quick message to let them know that like these are the things that we're doing, and I know that everyone's not on the same pace. Some of you have completed everything. Some of you can use next week to do this chapter 4 and maybe get caught up on chapter 3, okay? But I know you guys are all doing some of it, and I'm hoping to see more of you in the Zoom chats, okay? Moving ahead. I am still having my days next week, and then I'm thinking about changing the Zoom time to maybe get more of you guys involved, okay? Oh, there's also a journal prompt. The journal prompt is about you personally, okay? Not about the book, right? The journal prompt has to do with like how things are different. You're going to explain in 5 or 6 sentences how things are different now than they were, okay? Before, while we were still in school, all right? So I miss your faces. See you soon. Bye.